Yeah. Good evening, everybody. Good morning, everybody. Whatever time zone you are in, it's our immense pleasure to welcome you another webinar session by Web Platform for Dialogue. Myself, Dr. Swati Chakraborty, platform moderator for Web Platform for Dialogue. I launched this particular space for people from all over the world to share similar thoughts, different types of thoughts, without any kind of biasness, without any kind of judgments, without any kind of harsh comments. This particular webinar, it's very, very close to my heart. This is about the hate speech annihilation, how art and education would create a space for the people from all over the world, irrespective of their differences with gender issues, irrespective of their differences with their color of the body, creed, religion, apart from their differences, let's try to find out some commonalities, some connection without the borders. This borders is actually man-made borders. So let's try to annihilate with art and education. And in this particular session, I'm really, really lucky to have Porsiana. Porsiana Beatrice, she is a wonderful person indeed. Because when I first approached Porsiana with social media connectivity, at first she said yes to my session. She is PhD candidate, Center for the Study of Religion and Politics, University of St. Andrews, UK. Also, she is research assistant for UNESCO Chair Peace, Cultural Development, Politics in Italy. It's a very prestigious chair. So she is research assistant for that UNESCO Chair Peace. And today's particular session, she will teach us, she will share her expertise in the field of hate speech, particularly how art and education is inculcate and create a wonderful safe space for everybody in the society. Porsiana, I personally thank you so much for this session, and I'm really excited to hear you. So let's welcome Porsiana with a closed hand. That's our culture from India. I welcome you all in this particular session. So welcome, Porsiana.
Thank you very much for this fantastic presentation. Can you hear me loud and clear?
Absolutely. And before you start, I have my friend and philosopher and my partner, Stella Francis from Nigeria. So after your presentation,
nice to meet you.
Yes, Stella is here with us. Stella is our keynote address speaker. So if you allow, Stella already joined. So before you start, Porsiana, I really, really welcome Stella. And Stella will definitely share some thoughts about how hate speech is actually working in Nigeria also, because Africa, they are struggling, the youth particularly, they are struggling a lot to address hate speech and how to get solution out of this kind of discussion. So definitely Stella is our keynote address speaker. So Stella, please share your thoughts. Thank you so much, Stella, for joining.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you also to Stella for joining us today. I think it's
Stella, I couldn't able to hear you. You are muted.
Yeah, I can't hear her. Now I can hear something.
Yes, Stella. Perfect.
So good afternoon, everyone. It's really good. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's afternoon in Nigeria, actually. Yeah. So, Sati, please, if you can repeat what you just said. I'm sorry, I didn't get it correctly. I think my network was a bit crackly.
I just trying to introduce, and I already introduced Porsiana, our speaker. That's all. So you can start about little bit about the hate speech and how it is related and relevant in Nigeria also.
Before the keynote address? That comes before the keynote address?
No, you can start with your keynote address. Yeah. What you are doing right now in Nigeria and your keynote address.
Okay. So basically, we've been doing a lot to counter hate speech because, like last year, we had a lot of programs and social media campaign. We had program with social media influencers and bloggers and youth leaders, because of course social media now has become the order of the day. That's where a lot of hate speeches are being made. They emanate from there actually. So we've been trying to counter it on social media and talking to those influencers and then we had collaborations with the influencers so that they can promote peace as against hate speech, because they are the ones influencing it. So basically, that's what we're doing with social media, and that's what we're doing with hate speech, and then we'll continue because it's really a problem, and then it's a continuous problem, and then we also all the time try to profile solution. So that's what we're doing basically here with the hate speech. So by that, I will present my keynote address. Thank you once again. At frontline of interreligious and intercultural dialogue, we have learned that our actions for peace must be ceaseless, consistently scaled, and not leaving behind innovation. And I like to further highlight that it is one thing to mediate for peace in an already conflicted zone, and another thing to promote peace within a diverse society, and the other to sustain the input. You can simply say we are demanded to work round the clock at the very fundamentals of peace, at the very fundamentals of what we have learned within those years, is that religion and culture are among the most powerful forces that influence people, especially religion. And a common objective of this truth is that religion answers the question of eternal hope. Because religion and culture extract the most influence of people on people, it makes them a trump card for interest group seeking to mobilize towards a goal or against each other. But whether a conflict has been caused primarily by religion and cultural difference, or religion and culture have been employed by interest groups to incite violence, in any case, conflicts involving those elements can be costly. Therefore, this therefore makes our work very crucial. When Dr. Swati and I set out for this initiative, we considered the similarity between India and Nigeria and the rich bilateral relationship those two significant populated countries share. We also realized that although the both countries have different socio-political upbringing, recent challenges related with inclusive society and creating mistrust and disharmony among peer groups, as is in other parts of the globe. We also realized that all forms of violence that has plagued both countries have continued to carry interreligious and intercultural elements, as both countries are confronted by a fragile political consensus on hate speech and safeguarding religious sites. And Dr. Swati rightly pointed out, while education cannot bear the sole responsibility for ending political and religious provocation, racism, and discrimination it can teach young people the importance of challenging cultural basics and stereotypes. We understand that our objective for peace and harmony across interreligious and intercultural borders can be achieved by dialogue. Dialogue always reminds us of the consequence of conflict, violence, and the importance of peace. Dialogue educates us, and is quite essential when we sit across table for dialogue as people of different faiths, different culture, and in this context, different religion. And in this context, different nationality, I beg your pardon. We also remind that in the end, we all are concerned by the same cares of life, to strive to put food on the table or pay child's tuition, to raise a family, and to protect our loved ones. Therefore, we all must be committed to fight our common enemy, the elements of this society that threatens our peace. Elements such as hate speech, destructions of holy sites, and several others. I would like to thank KAISIT for their tremendous dedication to fight for peace across the world. I will also thank my colleague Swati for her hard work and all the participants for agreeing to join this initiative. Once again, I thank you all.
Thank you so much, Stella. Thank you for your wonderful insights. And now I'm requesting Porsiana for starting our sessions today, and we will have our discussions and question and answer sessions afterwards. Porsiana, the floor is yours. Porsiana, you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, perfect.
Fantastic. So I hope you're also able to see my PowerPoint presentation on your screen.
Yeah.
So can you see the second slide as well?
I think this is the first one. Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Perfect.
Okay, so thank you very much, Dr. Swati. I hope I'm pronouncing it right, Chakraborty, for this fantastic presentation. Many thanks to Dr. Stella Francis for this keynote presentation, especially when it comes to the Nigerian context. I also would like to say thank you to Gloria Ingoma, who's the founder at Zambia Peace and Conflict Resolution and Development Institute, who's here with us today. But again, many thanks to the web platform for dialogue for giving me the chance to talk to you today about art and education, hate speech, annihilation. So let's get started. So what is hate speech? According to the United Nations Strategy and Plan of Action on Hate Speech, there is no international legal definition of hate speech, and the characterization of what is hateful is controversial and disputed. The term hate speech is understood as any kind of communication in speech, writing, or behavior that attacks or uses pejorative or discriminatory language with reference to a person or group on the basis of who they are, in other words, based on their religion, ethnicity, nationality, race, color, descent, gender, and either identity factor. This is often rooted in and generates intolerance and hatred, and in certain contexts can be even demeaning and divisive. But in spite of the difficulties of defining hate speech, let's give it a try. Thanks to Maria Antonia Paz, Julio Montero Diaz, Alicia Moreno Delgado, who define hate speech as a conscious and willful public statement intended to denigrate a group of people. Also, the European Commission's recommendation against racism and intolerance in 2015 cites hatred toward, humiliation of, and contempt for a person who belongs to a group. So we've seen that hate speech can be directed either to a group or a person. Now, other definitions of hate speech include identifying characteristics such as race, color, religion, ethnicity, nationality, gender, sexual identity, and orientation. And the greatest challenge for the legal literature, which has addressed this subject extensively, is to establish a clear differentiation between hate speech and hate crime in order to support the application of criminal sanctions. So these questions, however, does not arise in extreme manifestations of hatred, such as incitement to genocide and terrorism. Now, we've seen that there's a challenge because hate speech is multifarious. The challenge of analyzing hate speech is not insignificant, since it takes on many forms in the media and in social networks. First, it is manifested verbally, non-verbally, and also symbolically. Secondly, it is deliberately expressed in a roundabout, ambiguous, and metaphorical way, making it difficult to identify. Now, there's a very brilliant paper entitled "All You Need Is Love: Evading Hate Speech Detection" by Grondal, Payola, Juti, Conti, and Asukan. So they say that when it comes to hate speech detection techniques are brittle against adversary who can automatically or intentionally insert typos, change word boundaries, and add innocuous word to the original hate speech to evade its detection through machine learning and algorithms. So sometimes all you need is to add a little bit of love, just a word that somehow recalls love, for that hate speech instantiation not to be detected. Now, the impact of hate speech requires also a broad action in fields such as human rights protection, prevention of atrocity crime, preventing and countering terrorism, the underlying spread of violent extremism, preventing and addressing gender-based violence, enhancing protection of civilians, refugee protection, the fight against all forms of racism and discrimination, protection of minorities, sustaining peace, engaging women, children, and youth. So we need a coordinated response to hate speech. But also when it comes to academia, there are plenty of academic studies focusing on hate speech. So the subjects that are touching upon analyzing hate speech are law, psychology, communication, sociology, social affairs, political sciences, theology, philosophy, pediatrics, computer sciences. So many of these publications tend to focus on the victim's point of view, through which they seek to define and specify the types of harm inflicted by hate message and the behavioral responses adopted by the targeted groups. From a psychological approach, a paper by Nielsen in 2002 documents through participant observation and in-depth interviews the experience of being the victim of racist and sexist discourses in the public sphere. So despite the limited sample, this paper concludes that hate speech causes harm in itself and sometimes also constitutes a crime, acts of violence, sexual assaults. Other authors consider the victim's perceptions of hate crimes. For example, Cowan and Hodge in 1996 hold that responses to hate speech are complex and depend on the purpose and publicness of that speech. Now, Another study in 2012 cited by Paz, Diaz, and Delgado finds common behavioral patterns in university students victims of anti-Semitic and homophobic messages, such as lasting effects and passive responses, although the students sought support. So Calvert in 1997 advances the repetition factor as a determinant in creating an abusive environment. Now, another significant group of studies in academia published in the 90s focuses on whether or not legislation should be introduced to ban hate speech. Now, Fish in 1997 suggests that instead of a prohibitive legal measure, hate speech calls for an alternative strategy. Altman in 1993 states that adopting a middle ground position between advocates and opponents of punitive preventative measures considers, despite the harm hate speech inflicts on people, prohibitions are never neutral, and not even when they tend to safeguard against hate speech. So several authors suggest that the internet is the main sources of hate speech nowadays, and that it is set to continue so, suggesting that history studies could provide a more comprehensive analysis of this problem in modern society. Now, the historical perspective is also included in multidisciplinary approaches, since highly complex issues such as populism, racism, anti-Semitism, among others, converge in hate speech, demanding a consideration of socio-political factors and political discourses themselves. Now, also the UN wants to address and mitigate hate speech. And in order to do so, the UN is implementing actions at a global level to enhance international cooperation among UN entities. The UN strategy follows 4 principles. The first, the strategy and the implementation of this strategy must be in line with the right to freedom of opinion and expression. The UN supports more speech, not less, as the key means to address hate speech. Second principle, tackling hate speech is the responsibility of all, according to the UN, of the governments, of societies, the private sector, starting with individual women and men. All are responsible and all must act. The third principle is that in the digital age, the UN wants to support a new generation of digital citizens empowered to recognize, reject, and stand up against hate speech. Fourth and last, we need to know more how to act effectively. This calls for coordinated data collection and research, including on the root causes, drivers, and conditions conducive to hate speech. Now, going back to the academic studies of hate speech. So we've seen the UN 4 principles that will guide the UN to address hate speech and mitigate it. Now, when it comes to academia, several authors tend to suggest that the internet is the main cause and is the main source of hate speech, and that these must be addressed. How? So there is a broad consensus for attributing specific characteristics to hate speech on social media. In other words, social media has changed the way racism, hate speech is portrayed. A change that is attributable to the characteristics of the platforms that host them. For example, unlike hate speech spread by other media, racist discourse on the internet has few emotional constraints. These can certainly be put down to anonymity, but also and above all to the range of new ways in which you can express it. Now, Twitter also, so the Twitter discourse analyzed by Ott in 2017 is described as usually simple, impulsive, and offensive. Antagonistic and negative feelings, for example, in Islamophobia, are articulated in terms of complex identity that refer not only to religion but also to ethnicity, politics, and gender, as Evolvi notes in 2019. And exclusionary rhetoric is frequent, as in the case of refugees in Europe. Most importantly, European nationalist and racist groups use Twitter to spread a socially accepted racist discourse, as Craze notices in 2017. And there is a wealth of research on pages with no political agenda that mobilize against racism, as Olkan notices in 2016. Now, there's also a study case that I would like to share today, and it's the case of Spain, studied by Mariel and Akeruld. So the case of Spain is a case of top-down hate speech. The mounting criticism of social media is leveled at the expression of user-generated content that is shot through with discrimination, intolerance, and prejudice, and at the platform themselves, Facebook in particular. Now, these social media networks are accused of promoting racism since they enable and influence various discourse strategies of identification and persuasion within which racist discourses are integrated. The leaders of Spain far-right parties make use of discrimination in their speeches, which their supporters after elaborate in comment spaces in social media. So hate speech in Spain seems to function in a top-down manner, from the dominant groups to the subordinate ones, as Del Teso Craviotto noticed in 2009. Now, the case of fake identities. Other papers study strategies in which Facebook profiles are set up with fake identities to spread hatred on the internet by imitating and inflating, for example, Muslim radicalism. For example, Farkas in 2018 has noticed that there are groups on Facebook calling themselves radical Islamists, disseminating racist and Islamophobic propagandas. The comments largely come from people with negative attitudes towards minority groups. Now, what are the psychological and motivational profile behind these hate speeches, comments, remarks? So the psychological and motivational profile of the producers, emitters of hate speech is addressed in a study by Barlow and Ewan. And two types of motivations tend to influence a basic authoritarian personality. The first involves the pleasure of the thrill sparked by a debate. The second one, identified, refers to the user's self-identification as, quote, guardian of justice in society, unquote. So when studying social media networks, images, photos, GIFs, memes, and so on, it is important to also read alongside their comments. So hate speech is multifarious. There is no way of just analyzing text, but also it is important to integrate in this analysis also the images, the photos, the GIFs, the emojis, the uses of memes. Because all of those contribute to the pejorative, denigratory, demonizing definition of the other. The analysis of metaphors, comical or satirical, must also be tackled because hate speech can also be very sophisticated. The greatest difficulty then is also in drawing a clear distinction between hatred and antagonism, as Paz, Diaz, and Delgado notice. Now, research into hate speech and the means of mobilization can make it easier to neutralize them. The literature shows that hatred is present in politics, sports, advertising, fiction. Sometimes hate messages can be kept in check through alternative discourses. But in any case, intervention in this field, even when it's guided by research, is an entirely different task. So responsibility for intervention rests with authorities, journalists, cultural and social agents, citizens, and their own initiatives. We also have a portion of the studies carried out in the Spanish languages. And these papers also present the two competing models. The American model, which is a model that defends freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and only censures speech that contributes directly to the committing of a crime. And then we have the European model, which instead condemns any advocacy of hate speech on the grounds that statements against the equality and dignity of minority groups constitute crimes, even if there is no direct incitement to violence. In this sense, I would love to hear more from Dr. Swati and Dr. Stella, and also from Gloria. So how about the models of Africa and Indian models, the Asian models, when it comes to tackling hate speech? Now, most of the authors in the Spanish arena, in the Spanish field of academia, tend to defend the European model and consider the perpetrators of hate speech not as simple political dissidents, but as people who seek to spread an ideology that lead to millions of deaths. However, some authors, while supporting limitations of hate speech, consider that some of these may affect meaningful expression. This is the case of Paul Diaz in 2011. Now, in context of Islamic terrorism in Spain, for example, emphasis has been placed on adopting the use of alternative narratives or counter-narratives or de-radicalization programs as part of an integrated plan to check hate speech or incitement to violence. Although the internet did not invent hate speech, as Paz, Diaz, and Delgado notice, it has increased its spread and capillarity. The internet even has the power to lend new social meaning to hate speech. Researchers advocate actions against the producers and promoters of hate speech and the establishing of regulations aimed at curbing access on social media. Now, a special notice goes to the study of Miro Linares, who wrote a taxonomy of violent communications and hate speech on the internet. He identifies 5 typologies of hate speech: direct incitement to violence, threat of a physical nature, offending honor and dignity, direct incitement to discrimination, and offending collective sensibility, use of hate language, including false information, flawed reasoning, divisive language, dehumanizing metaphors. To summarize, we need to fight hate speech by studying the use of the mediums, newspapers, social media. We need to study the subject matter of the discourse. So, for example, whether hate speech is targeting gender, sexual identity, nationality. And then we need to consider the environment, the sphere, the scenario where this kind of discourse takes place. And finally, we need to understand, to study the stereotypes and stigma that become narratives of aggression, especially on the social media. Now, as Adriana Metamoros Fernandez and Joan Farkas notice in Hate Speech and Social Media, a Systematic Review and Critique, social media companies play a particular central role, and a handful of mainly US and Chinese corporations have grown into near ubiquitous giants, while companies such as Facebook present themselves as democratizing forces. Increased attention has in recent years been given to their role in mediating and amplifying old and new forms of abuse, hate, and discrimination. An example, as social media have come to dominate the socio-political landscape in almost every corner of the world, they continue, racist speech thrives on social media, including through covert tactics such as the weaponizing of memes and the use of fake identities to incite racist hatred. Reddit, for example, gives rise to toxic subcultures, YouTube to a network of reactionary right racist influencers, and coordinated harassment instead is pervasive on Twitter. Users also reproduce racism through seemingly benign practices such as the use of emoji. So, after this overview of the academia study on hate speech, there is a need to go beyond the text-based analysis of hate speech on social media, because we've noticed that, as I said, there's a way to evading the detection of hate speech on social media by adding nice, kind words or typos. There's a need to tackle the root causes of hate speech. And from a philosophical point of view, the main root cause of hate speech could be identified as the fear of otherness, as the fear of diversity. So there's a need to promote the values of tolerance, non-discrimination, pluralism, and freedom of opinion and expression. How? Through education. So it is in this respect that education becomes particularly important. I want to look at education because education allows us to annihilate hate speech before hate speech takes place. How? Through literacy and art. So in the moment, so when we when we design a more comprehensive literacy that somehow includes a further look at different religions, ethnicity, nationalities, race, colors, descent, gender, and other identity factor, when we have a more comprehensive education that regards all these factors that are targeted by hate speech, we might avoid that fear of otherness, that fear of what is different, that is one of the main root causes of hate speech. And by adopting a metaphor of Professor Melloni, who's an Italian historian, I would like to say that it is important to become acquainted, to know, to interact with different cultures, different traditions, different religions, because in the moment that we know all the different letters of the alphabet, we can learn how to combine them so that different letters of the alphabets, in spite of their differences, can create words. And in spite of their difference, these words can create phrases. And these phrases can become poems. So there is a way in which this otherness, this diversity is no longer seen as a threat, is no longer seen as something to be scared of, but it becomes an added value that allows us to work together, to create words, to create phrases, to create poems, to collaborate together. So there is the dimension of having a more comprehensive literacy, But also education can be particularly impactful when it comes to art. Art as a tool for learning, healing, and immersing yourself in a reality and perspective that is different from yours to enhance empathy towards the groups targeted by hate speech, providing humanizing values in education to illustrate intangible concepts. So these two dimensions of educations can allow us to address the fear of diversity and otherness from a reasonable point of view and from an emotional point of view. So now I will take a little stop in order to sip some water and ask kindly Dr. Swati, how long do I have to start with the second part of my presentation, which is, I think, the most interesting part. It's about the art gallery that I want to share with you. So do I feel...
Brilliant, brilliant. Please sip some water. And meanwhile, I really would like to have some comments over the previous slides. And actually, for me, it's not a slides. It's like the words from the horse mouth. So you are the wonderful person to know. You have the entire knowledge, how the academia, the entire academic world is actually seeing the concept of hate speech.
Thank you
And
so much.
and from you, actually, I came to know so many things altogether. Like I have already pointed out the point, religion. That's what we are doing, interreligious studies and the dialogue, because uh, as a part and parcel of KAICIT is an organization based in Vienna. You must heard about KAICIT. I'm very
Of
close to
course.
KAICIT, and I'm also been fellow and working with them since 2017. And initially, when I started as in a fellowship journey, I wasn't been aware of this kind of words, literally. But when I digged into this kind of words, and it's very close to me right now. Being a human rights researcher, with my journey in a master's and PhD also in human rights, I worked with the person who actually don't know about human rights. But now I came to know that they really don't know about their own religion, neither about their own religion, their identity, nor about the others. So it's very complicated, because when we are thinking about doing something, changing the entire world, we need to think with a very concrete but very small idea. And you gave us the space to think that from where we could able to start, from where we could do something being together. Maybe I'm in India, maybe Stella in Nigeria, maybe you are in UK. But what are the commonalities and what are the connectivity that we can think about it, and how we can able to imagine the world without border? So let's start with your second part, and we will have some questions if the
Fantastic.
yes, if the
Wonderful.
here who are the present, if they would have some questions, they can raise later on in their chat box also.
Yes, fantastic. I actually want to add two things to what you just said. Absolutely. Let's make words together. Let's make a phrase, a sentence, a poem together. So in spite of our differences, we can work together and create and write beautiful poems. And not just in spite of our differences, but because of our differences, and also because of what is our shared humanity that you were, and our commonalities that you were mentioning before. And just to be just while you were talking, I took the opportunity to display some of the references, of the most important references that allowed me to write this paper, that informed me through the process of compiling this presentation. So now I would like to go with you through what I think is a very interesting part of the presentation, and I entitled it Art Gallery. Why art gallery? So we said that art is an important tool for learning, healing, and immersing yourself in a reality and perspective that is different from yours. And because we've been talking about hate speech, I created this art gallery that consists of different artworks that see words as at center stage. So because hate speech is characterized by words that are hateful, but not just words, because we've been talking about GIFs, mimes, emoji, that images and symbols that can be used by hate speech. But because hate speech is also using words to make hateful comments, I decided to select works of art that do present words at center stage for the opposite reason of hate speech. And this was feasible thanks to a research project I am part of at the University of St. Andrews entitled Theartistry, that sees it's a research project particularly focusing on works of art that do see the combination of images and words and text. And in particular, the selection of artworks that you're going to see are from The Word is Art, a wonderful collection of works of art compiled by Michael Petrie. So let's get started. The first image you see here is a work of art entitled Identity by Alexander Duracevic. Apologies for the pronunciation. So we can see in this work of art words at center stage. Let's read them. Albanians thought I was a Montenegrin. Montenegrins thought I was Albanian. Italians thought I was a Slav. Latinos think I am Italian. Blacks think I am French. French think I am one of their own. So in this work of art, you can see how the concept of identity is complex even for the artist himself, being seen as an Albanian, a Montenegrin, an Italian. And we've seen that identity is often the target of hate speech. So if identity is a complex concept for the person experiencing his own identity, living within his own identity, we can see how hate speech can be damaging when it comes to people who have this very complex story. Alexander Duracevic, for example, is the artist was the official artist for the pavilion of Montenegro at the 56th Venice Biennale in 2015. And his exhibition has a title that is both in Italian, in Montenegrin, and English. Ti ricordi Siekas Lise, and you remember, apologies for my pronunciation in Montenegrin, which was based on cultural, personal, clan, and religious memory. This exhibition has 3 different titles in 3 different languages. And while the artist is part Albanian, this particular mix of languages makes reference to the complexities of identity and memory associated with his place of birth. Duracevic does not take a documentary approach to memory, but he aims to explore the possible ways in which it functions in a country that was at war in recent decades. Identity, this work of art, is a visual and verbal joke made from bronze letters fixed on a blackened wall. The use of bronze hints at institutions and permanence, yet the work reminds the viewer of our continued insistence of difference. Now, the second work of art I would like to show you is by Anatol Notek, and its title is Nothing Lasts Forever. As you can see in this work of art features the letters forever, and in particular, some of these letters have fallen on the ground, and we have standing on the wall just the word over. So hate speech has this kind of power. Hate speech has the kind of power of ending a life in literal terms, because hate speech can lead to hate crimes, ending a life. But hate speech can also mean the end of the aspirations, the ambitions, the dreams of a person that make his life or her life go beyond the imminent level, beyond the level of mortality, and reach that level of immortality, that level of forever. So whenever hate speech incurs, we see that the dreams, the ambition, the aspiration die and are over, because the person, the victim, tends to feel embarrassed, hurt, and so his dreams are over, if not his life. Now we have another work of art, and this work of art is by Miri Sigal, entitled Don't Be Evil. So this is a kind reminder to every one of us to not be evil when we surf the internet, when we write on our social media platforms. The Israeli artist investigates the way in which consumers interact with the internet. With this "Don't Be Evil" colored aluminum letters recall the graphics of the search engine Google. The phrase was previously the motto of the company's code of conduct. Then Google abandoned this motto, but it's still a good motto for every one of us while using the search engine Google or while writing on the social platform. Let's remind not to be evil when we write, when we use mimes, when we use gifs. Now, another work of art is the work of art by Alan McGee, and it's entitled Sorry. This work of art is part of a gap fill, an exhibition by the Irish artist Alan McGee. And this sculpture features the word sorry, made from wood, and each letter is standing 240 centimeters tall. The work formed a barrier in the pop-up exhibition space at the Highlands Gallery in Drogheda, acting as an obstacle to viewing smaller works in a room behind the sculpture. So you can interpret this work of art as you want. I would say that this work of art, it was an obstacle to viewing smaller works of art. So there are words used on social media that are louder than others, that are an obstacle in hearing other voices, because there are financial powers behind words being used on the social media that allow for some specific posts to be monetized, to be advertised. So some posts can have a greater reach, can be much louder, just like this word sorry. And other opinions that are less hateful and more constructive, unfortunately, see this kind of obstacle in their emergence. And also we can see the word sorry standing here. Sometimes sorry is a good start when it comes to hate speech, saying sorry to the victims of hate speech, but that could not be the only thing we can do. We can do more. And now let's go to the next work of art I selected for you. This work of art is by Ryan Everson and Jason Garcia, and it's entitled Fear Expanded. Why I've selected this work of art for you. So the word fear is particularly important. In fact, we said that hate speech is often founded on the fear of otherness, fear of diversity, fear of what is unknown. Now, the American artists Ryan Everson and Jason Garcia channeled the extreme anxiety found in contemporary culture thanks to this work of art. And the artists that usually work solo collaborated to create this fear expanded. The sculpture is made from mirror, on wooden supports and is set in a field in Last Chance, Colorado. Its location, seemingly in the middle of nowhere or the middle of Middle America, heightens the tension inherent in the work. Out in the open, what is there to fear? It could be argued that since the 9/11, and yesterday it was the anniversary of the 9/11 terrorist attacks, the US news media cultivated a fear of others, of the difference, of the different, a fear of nature, and under the administration of Trump, also a heightened fear of Muslim has been detected. The work reflects its surrounding as well as any viewer bold enough to approach it. Now, let's go to the next slide, which features a work of art by Viba Galotra. And I hope that Dr. Swati can help me in correcting me in the pronunciation of this work of art, which is, the title is in Hindi, and it's Asuvida ke liye ke hai, okay hai?
असुविधा के लिए खेद है.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I knew you would be there to rescue me. So the translation in English is sorry for the inconvenience. So this work of art is a very satirical response to the ubiquitous presence in public settings of this Hindi phrase, which translates in English as sorry for the inconvenience. So we can't keep using this sentence, sorry for the inconvenience, when we see the victims of hate speech. We can't simply resolve the problem of hate speech by saying sorry for the inconvenience. This is not enough, especially because the fact that the phrase sorry for the inconvenience is becoming more and more ubiquitous is starting to lose its meaning. So as viewers or inhabitants of these settings, we encounter this phrase in the form of impersonal printed notice or recorded phone message, and the words offer a constant reminder of our helplessness and alienation from the city structure. But in the case of hate speech, are we really that helpless and far from being able to make a difference? Now, another work of art that I've chosen for you is entitled Active Memory by Shan Sheng. So this work of art by the Chinese-American artist was commissioned by the San Francisco Arts Commission to make this cascade suspension sculpture entitled Active Memory, which explores the Chinese-American experience through calligraphy. The works comprises 8 strands of Chinese characters made from red Venetian glass. The characters include fragments of ancient verse by famous poets dating from the Tang and Song dynasties. And strand 3 quotes Li Bai, quote, "Under the blue sky, your lonely sail turns into a silhouette. Only the long river rolls on its way to heaven." So this work of art represents the Chinese history and the history of the Chinese migrants in the US. And the Chinese migrants have been very recently targets of hate speech. We remember how at the beginning of the pandemic in the United States, Chinese people were targeted by hate speech because the virus was defined as the Chinese virus. So another instance of hate speech, in this case targeting Chinese and in particular also Chinese migrants in the States. Now, this following work of art is entitled "The Blank Space Does Not Go Unnoticed," and it's a work of art by the British artist James Balmforth. And this work use words in a variety of media, including metal and digital form, and consists of an anodized aluminum plate stamped with the title. In this work of art, the artist used an electronic grinder to erase violently what could be the most important word in the sentence. The viewer can conceptually insert any word they like into that blank space. Now, why I chose this work of art for you? Because sometimes censorship can be helpful, but can also make the message even more interesting, more an object of attention. So each and every case must be studied. Now, this work of art is entitled There is Another Way of Looking at Things. It's a work of art by Maurizio Nanucci, an Italian artist. And I particularly like this work of art. As you can see, there are children sitting in front of it. And this goes back to that concept of education, on the importance of educating people to prevent the emergence of hate speech. So hate speech can be annihilated at its root when you have a good education. So this work of art features the following words. There is another way of looking at things. Language allows us to create new thoughts, to interact with others, to change in every moment of our lives, everywhere in the real world. The human longing for freedom requires an understanding of different languages and cultures, different attitudes, different times and places, all of which speak of the same human needs and aspiration. There is another way of looking at things. So we see our common humanity, to which Dr. Swati was referring to earlier today. All of these different places, all of these different times speak of the same human needs and same human aspiration. So this is an invite to see in our fellow human beings who have our same aspirations and needs, but they simply have different traditions, different languages, different cultures to be learned, to be known, rather than to be targeted by hate speech. Now, last but not, now the penultimate work of art is this work of art by a Black man in America. I Am a Man comprises 20 small paintings, each with black on white text based. And it's about the civil rights era protest signs. Each painting offers a variation of the titular phrase, including be a man, you the man, I am. The question, these paintings question the visibility of others in what is still predominantly a white society where arguably open racism has become acceptable once more, and hate speech is more and more becoming the way through which racism is becoming acceptable again. Now, the last work of art I've chosen for you is entitled Yes, and it's by the artist Idiko Buckley and Jane Palmer. It's entitled Yes. It's a work of art that sees the collaboration of these two artists, and they created this large mirrored sculpture featuring the word yes. And this was created for a festival on the River Thames. It toured 10 riverside locations, and it's still exhibited extensively. The sculpture has inspired a large community, and it seems to radiate optimism. It makes people shout out, yes, with joy. Yes, we can fight hate speech together by annihilating, by avoiding its occurrence, its emergence through education and art. So let's say yes to all the positive values of society, and let's say no to the hateful speech. And if you're not yet convinced, I have this little poem for you. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. So this poem by Martin Niemöller, written at the end of World War II, reminds us that it is important for all of us to speak out for our fellow human beings, not just because it's right, because it is right, but also because if we want somehow to be supported by our fellow human beings, we have to speak out for them too, for them to be there when it is our turn to be defended and supported, because we might be the target of hate speech. So many thanks to each and every one of you for your patience, for listening to me. And if you have any questions, please feel free to address them now if Dr. Swati thinks it's the case. Otherwise, you can find me on LinkedIn, on Twitter, or you can write to my email address shown
Thank
on
you
the slide.
so much. Thank you. Would not
Thank
be
you.
enough word to express my gratitude to Porsiana, particularly. And it's bottom of from my heart that I'm feeling so great to hear. First of all, and there is a one question that Dr. Mansoor Alam Siddiqui asked. You can read from the chat box that what he asked, and you can reply him back.
Yes, fantastic. So I'll go through the chat box. So there are a few messages regarding our technical issues at the beginning. And after that, so we have a question from Dr. Mansoor Alam Siddiqui. So many thanks for writing to us. With the advancement of information technology, hate speech acquired new dimensions across the globe. True. Social media is not fulfilling its duties and portraying bad images of some religion like Islamophobia and ISIS. All brainchild of Western media. Social media should be watched, banned. Please give your comment. Thank you very much for your question, remark. So I absolutely think that social media do have an important role in tackling social media. And I think that they should be held responsible for the appearance of hate speech when it comes to in every single form of hate speech. I think that that there should be commissions, ethical commissions in every single social media platform, from Facebook to the smallest one. There should be an ethical commission judging and acting immediately when there are appearances of hate speech. Of course, ethical commissions must follow a code of conduct. So there should be like a code according to which they will judge each and every case of hate speech, so that, because it's not always very easy to distinguish hate speech from antagonism. So that's why I think it is important that apart from algorithms judging occurrences of hate speech in social media, there should be commissions made of philosophers, theologians, historians who can judge these occurrences of hate speech on social media. I hope I answered to your question. Let me go to the next one.
Not any questions. People would like to say thank you and greet you. I have one question to you, if you
Yes,
allow
of
me.
course.
What I felt that being a human, it's really a challenging task for everybody nowadays, not only in Indian perspective, but from all over the world. Uh, Due to COVID, situation have changed a lot. Entire 1 year, we are missing out the human interaction. That human touch is missing. we have to do online classes, we have to do this kind of webinars. Previously it was quite easier for us to meet in person with our friends, with our colleagues. So what do you think, this kind of digital inclusion is somehow creating exclusion also in, and it is also creating some kind of hate speech, and do you think so?
Yes, I think so. Let's start by the fact that not everyone has a laptop, not everyone has a Wi-Fi connection. So there is a big exclusion of people who do not have this kind of equipment and means from from the international dialogue, from the international platforms. So there is their exclusion also when it comes to education. And so from this perspective, there is a lot of work to be done not to exclude those who don't have the means to connect with the rest of the world from a digital point of view. In fact, I was taking part to a European conference earlier this at the beginning of September, and some of my friends had difficulties to connect with us because simply their connection was faulty, or their Wi-Fi was somehow they didn't have a Wi-Fi, they couldn't reach their university where they could use the Wi-Fi. So unfortunately, I'm afraid that there's that many people are being excluded from debates and are feeling more and
That's so
more
true.
isolated.
That's so true. That's so true. We have two questions from Gloria. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your question. How can we ensure conflict sensitivity awareness on social media? Is cybersecurity the only way to curb hate speech? Ah, that's wonderful. That's connected with my question to
Yeah,
Porsiana. Yeah, please.
fantastic. So, hi, Gloria. Thank you for this question. And so I know Gloria, she's the founder of the Zambia Peace and Conflict Resolution and Development Initiative. So this is a very interesting question. So I would start from saying that censorship is not, or cybersecurity is not the only way to curb hate speech. In fact, so I mentioned one paper entitled "All You Need Is Love." So "All You Need Is Love," in particular, this paper is pointing out how hate speech can somehow evade the detection of machine learning, of algorithms. So cybersecurity cybersecurity can solve the issue up to a certain point, and I don't think it's the only way to curb hate speech. I think so there are two ways we can curb hate speech. First, we address the root causes, and then we address its impact. So when we address the root causes, so for example, as I said, we have a more comprehensive education, we try to avoid and fight the occurrence of hate speech. So in this case, we can avoid the appearance of hate speech by having a better education. But then there's also a second way of fighting hate speech, in particular, the impact that hate speech has on people, on victims. So when we do have occurrences of hate speech, what do we do? So cybersecurity is an option, yes, but also there are some programs of de-radicalization that target people who were authors of hateful comments on the social media. So trying to approach them and de-radicalize them, it's a more difficult approach, but probably it's very interesting because it's a more effective one in the long run. So instead of simply, for example, eliminating, deleting the hateful comments, it's interesting to try the way of dialogue with the people who are writing these hateful comments and trying to show them how hateful and unfounded, ungrounded their comments are. I hope I addressed this question
Yes, you addressed
exhaustively.
well. Yeah, one more question from Khurshid Ahmed. Media is also promoting hate speech nowadays on live debates. So, do you think that in a democratic, if it happen, which is of course happening, can hinder the progress on global level and its foreign policies?
Media promoting hate speech nowadays on live debates. So there are some papers actually pointing out how some journalists are not ready to manage the extent of hate speech in the comments received on their papers or on live media, so on Twitter. So I think that media. So I think that even if it might not be intentional, the promotion of hate speech, sometimes media, like TV or journals or newspapers, are not ready to fight hate speech or to recognize occurrences of hate speech. So it's not an intentional promotion, but it's more like they're not equipped to counter hate speech or to mitigate the appearance of hate speech on their platforms. And
We have
so,
Thank you so
yeah.
much, Porsiana. It's been really wonderful to hear you. We have a very wonderful participant here today who is very silent. Amjad, would you like to introduce yourself and who is doing wonderful work in terms of promoting peace and countering hate speech with his organization? Amjad, would you like to please explain something and share something with us?
Hi,
Um,
Amjad.
Hi everyone. Thank you, Swati. You've caught me off guard. Actually, I was hoping to be a silent observer and just really listening to some of the thoughts that have been shared. And I completely resonate with this aspect of sort of the use of cultural expression, right? To express something, to kind of link, to create a safe space for a conversation that sometimes is difficult to have. And I think it's important that we do that, because I think when we talk about peace building and when we talk about creating those safe spaces, I mean, we know, and I'm talking to a converted crowd here, but art and culture are opportunities for us to, from both perspectives. It's a way of therapy. So it's you're able to kind of get people to express their thoughts. And often when people are faced with a very traumatic episode, whether it's a conflict or whether it's been domestic abuse, art and culture is a really great way of kind of expressing that. But it's also a great medium for a conversation that can be it's a great space for a conversation to take place that doesn't feel it's a threat to communities, right? And so often when you talk about art or culture, music, all of these things are sort of great ways of expressing an idea that authorities may not find threatening, right? But it still kind of links that, and it also brings that together. So I think that the space that Porsiana is talking about, I think, is really important for us to explore. And we don't do much about it, because art and culture, we just kind of, it's nice. It's like a nice to have. It's like an accessory that we have, on top of our piece. But something that I think actually that often that's probably a safe enough space, because it's a conversation everyone can have. And for me, when we talk about art, culture, music, food, all of these things represent that safe space and that brave space to have a conversation. And so I think we don't do enough of it, and I think it's something we sometimes need to connect more, because peace building will often become very theoretical and it's very institutional, whereas these things, I think, offers us a different opportunity. So no, thank you for what you've done, and I'd love to kind of talk more, Porsiana, in terms of some of the work that you're doing, and probably Swati, you can connect later on with Porsiana,
course.
but love to
I
kind
love
of
I love to.
can
Thank you
carry
so
that.
much, Amjad.
Thank you.
I really would like to introduce Amjad to everybody. He is a manager protection inclusion engagement at International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Society. He is also doctorate and is Muslim spiritual person. Also, he is from Sri Lanka, a country with who suffered, a country with full of resources, with full of wonderful people, but a country who actually suffered a lot due to the conflict things. And being an Indian, and I spent a lot of time in South India, and who are very, very connected with the cultural connectivity with the Sri Lankan people, particularly because we have lots of Tamil friends and who always talk about the issues in Sri Lanka. So I can feel here with Porsiana's talk that how actually art, education, and culture could create a safe space for everybody to speak at least something. What happened, what's wrong with us, that sometime what we felt we couldn't able to express, and that lack of expression, we somehow felt not very much comfortable whether if I will speak about this issue, if I'll speak about this particular concern, it may hurt somebody, but let's speak out and maybe you can both able to find out a solution. So I think that's the essence of the dialogue. Thank you so much. I'm not going to enter in depth, but I really want to convey the message that Porsiana gave us with yes, we can. So yes, we can do this, and we will definitely do this with this starting. This is not the ending of our webinar, but rather it's another starting, and we will definitely be in touch with Porsiana and other participants if you would like to relate with Porsiana, and if you like to have Porsiana's email ID, kindly note down. I have already written in the chat box, so we can have this. Thank you so much. And yes, Porsiana.
If I just may add a final remark. So I would like to thank you, Dr. Swati, for giving me this opportunity. And I want to remember about what Dr. Stella Francis said about the importance of interreligious dialogue. Interreligious dialogue is quite an interesting platform for us to study and learn when it comes to fighting, when it comes to not be afraid of the otherness. So interreligious encounter, interreligious dialogue is quite interesting because that fear is being fought, because interreligious dialogue allows us to see the commonalities, which is most of the times also the spiritual part of our different religions. So there's a safe space in interreligious dialogue, and so interreligious dialogue is teaching us the first step, the first mile we can walk together when it comes to otherness, and to living together, not in spite of our differences, but because our differences are an added value that can help us navigating these times, difficult times, these pandemic times. So I think that interreligious dialogue is an interesting study case when it comes to combating and fighting the fear of otherness. So thank you very much also to our keynote, Stella Francis, and to you again, and the Web Dialogue for Change, for the web platform for dialogue.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Have a wonderful time, and definitely we will be in touch. So all of you who haven't yet filled your feedback form, it's very important to have your certificate. So kindly fill out the feedback form. It's not for you, Porsiana. You will receive your excellent certificate as a speaker. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Porsiana.
And thank you, Stella. Thank you would not be enough because Stella is very, very close to me. And so
thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Siddiqui sir. Thank you,
Thank you to each one of you.
Thank you, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.